Okay, so just like Travis Hershey's theory, his original theory about social bonds, this new theory, the general theory of crime, also has something interesting to say about the role of delinquent peers and what role peers play in people committing crime. So the ideas here are a little bit similar to the ideas from Hershey's original theory. In this respect, he doesn't deviate that much from his original theory, but he does update his ideas a bit here, because we're not talking about social control, we're talking about self-control. So, the basic idea here that Goffredson and Hershey put forward in their new theory is that the reason that people tend to commit crime in groups, especially young kids, is because kids who have similar levels of low self control are going to be likely to come together as friends. So, in that way, your friends might provide opportunities for you to commit crime, but they don't necessarily change or increase or decrease your behavior. So, again, very similar to the ideas that Hershey originally stated, Goffredson and Hershey's theory, the general theory of crime, suggests that low self-control kids who developed a very low level of self-control, tend to flock together as they grow up and form peer groups. So it's not that your peers cause you to commit crime, it's just that you're committing crime with these people because, like you, they have similar levels of low self-control. Again, this is a very different idea from learning theories. People like Gottfredson and Hershey don't attribute a lot of your behavior to influence from your peers. Rather, what they note is how similar peers are, and that is a big reason why they get together and be friends in the first place. Now, similar to Travis Hershey's original theory, the general theory of crime has also been tested quite a bit since it was originally formulated in the early 1990s. And there are a couple different ways that people do this. A couple different ways they try to measure this theory, because really the key issue here, if you're going to try to test this theory, is can you actually test and measure whether or not someone has a low level of self-control? So there's a couple different ways that people have tried to do this. And the first way that was tried was trying to measure it by assessing people's attitudes. So what scientists would do is they would ask people questions to try to assess their preferences for risk-taking behavior, their attitudes towards controlling their impulses, and when you measure it that way, when you ask people to report on how likely they would be to do something, or if they feel that certain behaviors are too risky or too impulsive, or if it's okay to do things to get what you want, even if there are consequences. Basically, what people found when they did those kind of testing to try to measure self control through attitudes, they found a pretty good amount of support. In other words, people who seemed like they had attitudes that were conducive to being someone with low self control, those were also people that reported the most delinquent and criminal activity. So in these attitude tests, they would ask people questions to report about their attitudes towards crime and other risky behaviors. And when they did that, they found support for their idea. The people that had the lowest levels of self-control, according to this measurement, also had the most amount of crime. Well, that's fine, but there is a measurement issue here, which even Gottfredson and Hershey don't like, this measurement of low self-control. And the criticism is, if you're measuring it by attitudes and you're asking people to report honestly about their attitudes about things, it stands to reason that people with low self-control aren't going to be very faithful test takers. So, people with low self-control might be too impulsive, thrill-seeking, risk-taking to take a survey and answer honestly. So you might not be measuring this as accurately as you would like to be. For people who truly have low self-control, they might not give you very reliable, usable results from something like a survey. So instead, what researchers have done is they've shifted to measuring behaviors. And I put the word better after this because Gottfredson and Hershey really feel like this is the best way to test their theory. Measuring what people do to try to see if they have low self-control. So one example of a way that people have tried to test this is by examining slightly less serious but still criminal behaviors. So one example would be research done assessing seatbelt use and drunk driving. Now, this research starts with an assumption, and the assumption is that people who purposely don't wear their seatbelts are people that are more careless, more impulsive, and people that minimize or don't think about the consequences of their actions. So, they're using seatbelt use, especially low seatbelt use, as an indicator of low self-control. That people who don't wear their seatbelts are likely people that have very low levels of self-control. So what they did is they asked people to report not only on their seatbelt use, but on a more criminal behavior, driving while drunk. And their hypothesis when they do this, if you're testing the general theory of crime, is people who don't report using their seatbelt are the people who are going to be more likely to be driving drunk, because they're both engaging in these risky, impulsive, self-serving behaviors. And basically what they found when they measure self-control this way is there does seem to be some support for this, that those who are people who aren't wearing seatbelts are the people who are more likely to be driving drunk. Therefore, they should also be people who are more likely to be doing other deviant, criminal, impulsive acts. So in this way, people have tried to test this theory. Now, not everyone really agrees that this is a really accurate way to measure self-control. People are still trying to figure out what is the best way to measure someone's self-control, because as you can imagine, it's hard to separate what self-control is from the behaviors that result from it. If you say that low self-control causes you to commit crime, and the only way you can tell if someone has low self-control is by whether or not they're committing crime, becomes kind of a circular explanation. It's hard to separate the cause from the effect. So this is an area where people are still trying to do research. One of the interesting things about Gottfredson and Hershey's theory is the policy implications that come from it. When you think about it, Gottfredson and Hershey's theory is a theory that doesn't really believe that there's much we can do about people who have developed a really low level of self-control. People who developed from early childhood impulsive, self-serving, thrill-seeking behaviors as part of their norm, according to Gottfredson and Hershey, aren't really going to be able to change all that much in a meaningful way. Gottfredson and Hershey have actually gone on record saying that they want us to divert funding of programming away from, people who are already in the criminal justice system, away from intervention and towards early childhood prevention programs. So it's an interesting theory because it's a bit deterministic about a person's life after age 5 when you think about it. And their solution to their policy implication that comes out of this theory is, let's try to help people become better parents during those incredibly formative years. Because we believe that this trait is stabilized by age 5, let's do as much as possible to help parents establish high levels of self-control in children. So one of the big things that has come out of their programming is early childhood prevention programs. Programs that target maybe low-income, high-risk parents and children, and instead of funding things like intervention programs in adulthood, directing funds into prevention programs for these kids in childhood. So it's these kind of parenting programs are for families who want to learn the foundations for successful parenting. And an example of that would be a program called The Incredible Years, which is a parent training program that has been designed and there are different levels of it for different age groups of children. So as you can see on the right there, excuse me, as you can see on the right there, that's just the front of the first installment of the Incredible Years program, and it's a troubleshooting guide for parents for children age 3 to 8. They also have a version age 0 to 2. They also have a version age 9 to 14. The point is they have parent training throughout these very formative years. And in the Incredible Years, basically what it does is it teaches parents the skills that they can put in place to help their children establish not only high levels of self-control, but problem-solving, social communication skills. They teach parents how to set limits for their children, how to offer tangible rewards for good behavior, how to communicate with their children and work through problems together, how to develop coping skills for behavior problems. So, teaching parents how to deal with kids who throw tantrums, who are aggressive and impulsive. And not a lot of parents maybe necessarily think that they would need parent training. But according to people like Goffredson and Hershey and people who believe that some of our biggest problems later in life can be traced back to early parenting, it's an incredibly important type of programming to be able to develop. If you think that people's problems develop and are set by age 5, you should be able to target those problems and try at least to intervene and help lessen them. And that's the policy implications. Those are the policy implications that come out of Goffredson and Hershey's work. They don't like programs directed towards inmates or people in prisons or jails. They do like getting at kids before they even become necessarily problems. Okay, so let's wrap up these control theories for a few minutes. I just want to bring up a couple key points here to make sure that you really understand how you should characterize control theories and how you can maybe set them apart from some of the other theories you've learned about. So first of all, think about the assumption, the essential assumption about human nature from control theories. Control theories all come at their explanations of criminal behavior under the assumption that humans inherently need control to inhibit them from crime and similar acts. If left to our own devices, we would all naturally act in a way that's going to get us what we want. We need societal controls to act in a pro-social, non-criminal way, because crime is the easiest way to get what you want. So it's a control theory because it's operating under the assumption that in the absence of controls, most people would commit crime. So, in other words, the questions that it asks, which separate it a little from other theories, is what protects some people from committing crime? Lots of people don't commit crime in society, or at least lots of serious crime. Why don't they? What are the protective factors? What are the forces at work protecting and controlling people from criminal behavior? And similarly, what frees the people who do commit crime to do these acts? What kinds of societal controls are weakened or broken or lessened in people who decide to commit in crime? And just keep an eye out for the policy implications here. Most of these programs that are based on a control theory are designed to strengthen social controls. Whether you're operating from a social or a self-control standpoint, the point is people like your parents, people like teachers, peers, pro-social others can help strengthen your bond to society, strengthen your self-control. However you want to characterize it, and it depends on the theory. Having stronger controls in your life is a helpful, beneficial thing. So things like parental training and early childhood prevention are really important to control theorists because according to them, if you can establish some of these things early in life, that's going to help you in the long run. Okay, so that's the end of today's lecture. Before you click off, I want to make sure that you understand what's happening next class. We're not meeting face-to-face in person for the next class because I'm actually going to be away. But what you are going to have to do is go to the library for a mandatory library session teaching you how to compile and collect the research articles needed for your paper in this class. So on March 8th, go to Cook Library room 526 and you will have a session with a librarian named Sarah Nixon. The next time that we have an actual lecture, again, is going to be online on March 13th. And the reading for that is posted on Blackboard. You have a portion of a chapter out of your Hagen textbook, and then there's also a Sampson and Lobb article on Blackboard. And that's it. Don't forget about your papers. Keep watching episodes of The Wire. Make sure that your paper isn't something you continue to put off and put off. And I will see you in a few lectures.